The lunar outpost is critical to the US military in the future. It was March 1959. And General Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Trudeau, the writer of these words, was indebted to Major General John Hinrichs, Chief of Military Armaments, to develop a proposal for a lunar outpost with crew, which would protect the potential interests of the United States on the moon. The story behind this secret study, known as the Horizon Project, and the plan to position the United States on the moon by 1966 is a strange but true story that is very forgotten today. Establishing a manned base for operations on the moon has enormous military and scientific potential. Since invaluable scientific, military and political prestige will come to the nation that first establishes the lunar base, it is imperative that the United States be the first. It is no secret that the moon is considered a strategic celestial body. Looking back at history, we find that many countries have planned scientific offices on its surface. However, there are certain documents that have only recently revealed the militarization projects of the moon. The lunar office is necessary for the development and protection of the potential interests of the United States on the moon. To develop moon-based space surveillance techniques and communications relays and in surface-to-moon operations. To serve as a base for moon exploration for further space exploration and for military operations on the moon if necessary. And to support scientific research on the moon. Given the increasingly tense Cold War with the Soviet Union and the Vassal Pact, it should come as no surprise that senior military leaders have considered the benefits of a military approach in space. Real physical presence on the moon would be the first step in the future of military space operations. Not only would it allow the United States to monitor the Earth and space on the moon, but if moon-based weapons were in place, it could protect US interests both on Earth and on the moon. Around that, the moon almost certainly had raw materials that would give Americans valuable commercial advantages over any other nation. Finally, there was no way to know what technological benefits would come to the United States from scientific research and experiments conducted on the moon. According to a secret 118 pages of the Horizon study submitted to the military department on June 9, 1959, to be second behind the Soviet Union in establishing a branch on the moon would be disastrous for the prestige of our nation and in turn for our democratic philosophy. The Soviet Union has already announced that its citizens and probably the Red Army will be in 1957 when the communist government in Moscow will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the October Revolution. This meant that it was imperative that the United States get there first. The idea of establishing a military position on the moon was inspired by the successful launch of a Soviet satellite on October 4, 1957, and the ensuing East-West space race. The goal of the Horizon Project was to develop a plan to build a self-sustaining lunar base that would serve as a branch for lunar exploration and further space exploration. The base, which would eventually have between 10 and 20 people, would be the first permanent installation with a manned crew on the moon. And, perhaps most importantly, would provide a platform for the military, if necessary, to conduct military operations on the moon. The Army concluded that 75 launches of the Saturn II rocket could be accomplished by the end of 1964 with the delivery of cargo to the moon in January 1965. This would be followed by the first landing of 2 people on the moon in April 1965 by these 2 people. Probably soldiers or at least military civilians would oversee the construction phase of the outpost until it was ready for a good move-in by a task force of 12 people in November 1966. The planners chose the Mare Imbrium, in Latin Sea Rain, as one of the 3-month regions as possible branch locations. As far as the base itself is concerned, scientists and technicians involved in the Horizon Project insisted that their proposed base was based on realistic requirements and capabilities. It was not an attempt to project so far into the future as to lose reality. On the contrary, they wrote that their access to the database was functional and reliable, an approach to which the crew can risk their lives with the confidence that they will survive. Recognizing that there was essentially no atmosphere on the moon, scientists decided that the lunar base should be built underground. They suggested that natural holes or caves could be covered and sealed with pressure bags to create living space. In order to supply the station, the Army planned to send 2 nuclear reactors per month, which would provide power for both residential premises and construction equipment. Scientists also believed that solar energy would eventually serve as a source of energy for the lunar base. The drawings in the study show a buried cylindrical structure that included living quarters with an air chamber on the surface. We must also look at the final point on the Horizon Project. His proponents argued that America's ultimate goal on the moon should be to set up a moon-based weapon system. But why? Because moon-based military power would be a strong deterrent to war, as the enemy would have great difficulty preventing US retaliation. This was because the enemy, probably the Soviet Union, but perhaps Communist China, could hardly make it to the moon, and if American forces were already present, they could oppose or neutralize any enemy force that might land. This was also the reason why the US military had to be the first to reach the moon and establish a military outpost, as the enemy could oppose any attempt by the US to land on the moon if enemy forces were allowed to arrive first. Today, however, we know that this concept of a military base on the moon did not happen. But why? There were at least 3 reasons. At first, the technological challenges were more severe than the authors of the Horizon project thought. The second spread of the war in Vietnam also took away energy and resources that might have had to be directed to the Horizon project. Third and most importantly, any future US military presence on the moon became impossible when the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom signed a space agreement in 1967. In the end, there were too many unknowns and the risks too high. While the Horizon project is largely forgotten today, it remains an idea whose time simply never came. And a strange, but true story in the history of the military. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and see you in the next video.